I'm WG and it's finally time we talk about the lifeblood of this game, the most complicated but also most important system there is, and that is Journey. So what you'll be able to take away from this video is basically everything you need to know to start making some killer builds, to start putting whatever you imagine into reality, and to hopefully make your way towards something along these lines right here, where we have our Arcana perks, where we have our talents, as you can see, our talents here, our skills, and then also still our levels in our senses, and then obviously that being supported by a good amount of stats. Before we go any further, it's important that you take note of these two crucial resources in making your journey life a whole lot easier, and that is number one, the Google Sheet right here by our guy Bullet, can be found like that on YouTube as well. And what you're mainly looking out for is the All Savior build guide, which we have a look at in a second, as well as also the Journey Hard strategy guide. But what you can also do is you can take a look at the Journey Hard guide if you want to do that, and you can try right click translate to English, and you might be able to extrapolate some more information from that. But what you're mainly looking for in the All Saviors build guide right here is going to be, you'll find every single character and how you have a bit of a recommendation on how to build them. So let's for example pick a Shara, and then it's important that you scroll over to the right, and what you then find is the Journey Normal Arcana setup, but then also the Journey Hard setup. So for the Journey Hard setup, you start with the Talisman. We'll go into a bit more detail on how that works and whatnot, but you'll find a Talisman or a gear piece, a gear perk recommendation, and then you'll also find a recommendation for example Journey Hard, which Arcanas you should be using, as well as also depending on, for example, if there is like a specific extra build, there is some recommendations here as well, like for example how every tank has a PvP version, and some of these DPS do as well. And also for some of these Journey Hards there can always be a replacement, like for example how Bunny Girl Scarlet could be replaced by Bunny Girl Claire, how Petra could be replaced by Naru, so stuff like that. So that's that. Very important that you keep those in mind. But what is even more crucial is the Kanban.github, and that is, it has everything what you need to know in regards to a journey when it comes to raw information. And that is because you have a scheduler which will tell you exactly what happens on every single turn throughout your journey, being able to help you familiarize yourself with taking certain actions leading up to certain events. So this journey planner can give you a better understanding of what happens on a journey. But for the most part, it's clearly the Savior gacha simulator, where you just do 100 rolls and then you see, oh wow, am I getting lucky, am I getting not? Obviously we're just kidding here. What is even more important is this Journey tab, and that is because on the Journey tab you are able to search for every single event in the game. Like for example, you can search by weather, which gives you every weather as well as every option depending on what you pick. You can also go by places. You can also go by, for example, Lizette events. You see all of those. But what you can also do is you can just search for the event itself. So it's, for example, Petra, and we find the Made by Petra Arcana, all three options and what they provide depending on what you pick. And what is important, make sure you swap the language up here from English to from Korean to English. And then it really finds you everything. Like for example here, if you type in new, you see the new department is working hard, and then you see all of these conditions. So keep this one in mind as well. Very crucial, especially to also for a first time understand an Arcana. I think a good example would be the Claire Arcana, the Perfect Bunny Girl. You'll notice that if at the third option you pick Play It Off, you get Talent of Life. But if you pick Tell Her Honestly, you actually get the Arcana perk. So here it's, for example, important to know that, because depending on what you want to achieve, you might want to hit Play It Off, or you obviously want to get the character perk. So before we go into the journey, we need to start with the very basics, and that is what actually affects a character in your journey. So what affects a character in your journey, the key part is going to be resonance. And that is because resonance is going to allow you to start with more stats. You see how we get, for example, strength, protection, sense of insight, strength, protection. You get the deal, right? Or for example, this means that your character will always start with the sense of attack perk, and then here is that they will always have the skill of insight as a perk to level. Usually, especially from hard journey, the most important milestone is going to be around resonance 8 as the base, resonance 9 because you get the final start stat increasement, and then journey 10 would be where their character gets like that final value bump, especially for parenting, which we'll also talk about in a bit. But yeah, resonance is by far the most important, but it's not all that counts, because you should also get value from, for example, dupes. If your character has a dupe that changes the way they play, that changes the way they work, they will also be more efficient in journey. So dupes do count towards how successful you can be in journey. The same is also true for skill ups, where skill ups, the higher your skills are, the harder they'll hit. The harder they'll hit, the less amount of trouble you'll be running into journey. And I think those are like the most important parts you need to keep in mind. It's a bit hard to say if affinity affects it, but for the most part, you gotta make sure you have a good resonance, and then you can, for example, start worrying about some skill ups, or maybe just wait until you get a specific dupe that actually makes the character a lot more useful. So those are all the things that affect the character going into a journey. Now, at the beginning of a journey, you have to really make a choice. So there is two ways you can go about this. Number one, you decide to make a character build that you are going to intend to use. That then includes you going in, selecting your Arcanas, and going with that, and then hopefully at the end of the day being able to get all the Arcana perks as well as some sense perks and the like, and putting together a build. But what there also is the idea of doing a run for the express and only purpose of getting a good inheritor, a good base character, a good partner for your journey. Now, what exactly are the benefits of this, and why is this actually so useful? So for that, yeah, let's talk about what they actually do. So these ones, they always guarantee to give you the stat they have. So for example, here if we pick this Lacey, we're going to get from her 35 strength. And let's say, for example, we pick ourselves this Emily, then let's just, I think we have a pretty interesting one somewhere in here. Let's pick this one. So you see we get plus 35 strength, plus 30 vitality. The important part is that is not just happening once. You get these stats at the start of your journey, meaning 35 to strength, 30 to vitality. You then get them again for the first time a partner joins, and then again the second time a partner joins. Meaning that the journey stat that you are getting is effectively getting counted 3 times. So instead of this just being 35 strength, it is in fact actually 105 strength, whereas the 30 vitality is actually 90 vitality, which is why this is the most important stat that you should be on the lookout for, because what this allows you to do is keep up with the increasing rank requirements, help you start with a bigger stat boost, help you clear stat thresholds easier. So this is why it's very important to have a high boost there, because the higher the boost, the higher the stats. And the second part is going to be these perks, and that is these perks have a chance to be inherited for your run, allowing your character to skill these perks at the end of the run. And if your character already has the perk, then getting them again through inheritance is going to give them a cost reduction, making you able to buy them for less potential points. And then obviously the bread and butter of journeys are Arcanas. So let's try and understand how Arcanas work and what makes them so crucial, and how certain things can interact in special ways. So for this example, let's pick the Lacey Arcana. So the Lacey Arcana is going to start with its journey effects, where for example journey start effects, you get a strength increase in 5, as well as this Arcana gets plus 12 bond points. Then also whenever you train, you have an increased effectiveness by 9%, condition effect increased by 11.5%, and then for sensory training effect, you have super sensory training effectiveness, which is the effectiveness whenever a character has enough bond points. It's when the training starts glowing. And what sensory training chance actually is the likelihood of your character or of this arcana appearing on its own training. So for example, what is the likelihood? It's in like an increase in likelihood that a Lacey will be featured on strength training, making that a very valuable stat. These stats differ from arcana to arcana and can be sometimes the reason why certain arcanas are stronger, why certain arcanas feel a bit weaker. Like for example, here is something along the lines of an old coin gain increase. Now the next part is the unique effect. So the unique effect usually gets triggered at a certain bond point value. We'll also talk a bit more about bond points and all that stuff. But for example here, whenever bond points with this arcana are at 60 or higher, you also gain 3% increased old coin gain. And then for the last part, there is 3 events that every single arcana has, and they can have 3 different focuses. So you can get stats, you can get potentials, and then you can get something along the lines of stamina or mood recovery. So what is very important for you to learn early on is stamina is king. The more stamina you have, the more you can train. The more you can train, the more stats you get. The more stats you get, the more likely you are to succeed and dominate in that run. And also the more you train, the more potential points you get, allowing you to buy more perks at the end of a run. And then for example, what you notice here is Lacey has not just 1, but 2, but 3 stamina events, making her incredibly potent in that regard. And then there is also other examples, like let's just find ourselves Bunny Girl Claire. Bunny Girl Claire, on the other hand, has the ability to give you a perk here, as well as also a perk here, or even the special potential, while for example also providing something like potential points and stamina along the way. So it is very important for you to be familiar with the arcanas you're going in. It's not something that is expected for you to happen run 1, but the more runs you do, especially with certain arcanas, the more familiar you should be with their events, and the more you should also be able to rely on certain things happening, like for example, instead of resting, betting on the fact that you're getting a certain arcana event giving you stamina instead. But that's a bit more of like advanced stuff. Now what is also crucial to note, at least, is these arcana perks, specifically for example, let's see, for example these ones right here, these perks, these are what you can inherit. You cannot give these big arcana perks further from like the parents you select at the beginning of a run, but you can get these. So having an arcana that has access to a lot of talents, a lot of skills, is very valuable, and is the foundation to build a good run. Alright, so it's now time for us to actually get into a run, for me to explain to you the various systems and what you want to do and what you try to avoid. If you're more interested in this parenting aspect, there will be a part later in the video where we'll go into more detail on how you can get yourself something similar to this. But for now, we're just going to select ourselves 2 parents, head in, and then have ourselves a journey. So let's just see what we end up picking here. Let's just pick it like this, and then it's obviously time for us to give our character the arcanas so that we're going to have a chance at a successful run. Important to note here, you can once again refer to the spreadsheet, or you can come up with the combination yourself. Just make sure that at the end of the day it makes sense, right? So here we want to find ourselves another arcana. Let's see which one would we actually go with. The Assassin Arcana. And if you were wondering what is going on with these blue arrows, that is, you have a 5% training effect bonus if the character you are building is getting a Arcana that is featuring the character. So for example, a Charlotte, Bunny Girl Charlotte gets a buff from a Charlotte, or the Bunny Girl Charlotte Arcana, whereas the Lacey would get one from the Lacey Arcana, Bunny Girl Freya, so on and so forth. You get the deal. So now that we have our Arcana selected, now that we have our line of perks that we want to apply to our character, for example, with Lacey we're getting crit rate attack, with Kyra we're getting speed, with Frey we're getting crit damage and some health, with Charlotte we're getting some speed, and with Petra we're getting the big bonus. It's time for us to get into a journey and have a look. So here obviously you can not shorten only viewed, or shorten all, depending on how invested you are in your character, how much more you want to learn about them, and how much you actually care about this. But just know, the further you go to the left, the longer the journey is going to take. So here at the beginning we get our inheritance, and you see we get our stats, and in this case we have not inherited any perks yet, but we still have 2 more remaining chances when the first and when the second combatant joins. Now, this is where it starts to get important. Every character has a certain power level for Journey. There are some characters that are able to deal with Journey easier, there are some characters that struggle with Journey more, but what you need to understand is, how does my character work? How do I intend to kill the enemy the fastest? And also, very, very important, this first item you get is character specific and should shape the run you approach, or should shape the way you approach a run. For example, here you grant yourself 1 stack of ignition at the start of the turn, but more importantly, you inflict the enemy with 3 instances of bleed, which is damage over time, with a 100% chance after using Bunny Step, which is the basic attack, and due to Bunny Girl Charlotte doing her basic attack twice all the time, that means that instead of actually using our ultimate, we are solely going to focus on basic attacks, because that is the fastest way to kill. It might take you a bit of time, a bit of thinking to see, okay, how does this actually end up working? But in general, figure out what can your character do and try to pick up items that, make sense. There is in general 2 major ways you can deal with the enemy. It's either, let's say 3, right? It's either raw attack or just raw HP based damage. Then you have yourself bleeds, which deal damage based on your attack. And then you have yourself poisons, which deal damage based on max HP. And those are kind of like the 3 major build paths, where usually you're either gonna go with bleeds for an attack based character or poisons for an HP based character. And that is then pretty much that. So now that we are in here, what do we do? Alrighty, so very important, training and bond points. So what you want to do at the beginning of every single day is you want to go through all these trainings, and what you're looking for, especially early on, is these icons. These icons is your familiarity, your bond points with your Arcanas. The higher these bond points, then you will be able to unlock, for example at 60, which should be 60% of the bar, unlock these unique effects. But also, even more importantly, you want to push the bar as fast as possible into green, so from blue into green, but that from green into gold. The moment the bar below a character glows gold, you are in hyper resonance, in hyper training range, allowing you to get additional stats from doing your training here, which means your early first few training sessions, maybe even your first 2 trials, should be spent on trying to get a good mix of journey bond points instead of just focusing on the main stat you want to build. Now, important here to note is these are the 3 major trainings you want to do, and that is because these are the 3 stats that help your character the most. Vitality, so they survive or for HP based damage. Strength, so they hit harder, or even for HP based characters, because they do also scale with strength, just not to the same degree as HP, but if you get maxed out vitality, going into strength is still more damage. And then focus training and protection. So what you notice is these top trainings, they also always cost you stamina, but focus and protection training do not. What is also important to note here is you get on average more potential points from doing focus or protection training than strength training. So if, for example, you have the choice between nothing over here or doing an instance of protection or focus training, you can do that, so you can get yourself more potential points, with which you'll be able to unlock perks. So for example, here what we are going to do is we'll just be doing our vitality training to build up some bond points. Now then we also get ourselves some random events. What also happens is every time you get an event for a Arcana, you'll further get bond points for that Arcana, allowing you to push towards that green, towards that golden range. And now here we are at the most important choice for your entire run, and that is the final perk you'll be able to get in your run. So, a training menu that helps with offense, survival, or in various situations. This should be at least somewhat familiar to you from the bullet sheet, and that is right here. So, if you end up picking offense, you get the choice between glove, headpiece, and necklace. If you pick survival, you get chest, pants, and boots. And if you pick various situations, you get access to, glasses, a cloak, and arm guard. And what these determine is what kind of special perk you get at the end of your run. This item determines the base. If you pick up gloves, you will always get an attack increase of 8 and then an attack increase by 8 at the start of each turn until you use an ultimate. If you pick up the chest piece, you get always HP at 8, as well as a 25% chance to restore HP when you are being hit. If you pick the leggings, you get yourself defense, as well as a defense increase when hit, reset stacks after hitting, so after your character doing a hit. If you pick up boots, you will get speed at its base, as well as also a chance to increase your action gauge. Then if you pick up the headpiece, you get yourself crit at 10% and the chance to trigger a random ally's basic attack once you basic attack crit with the character that wears this or has this. The necklace is going to be crit damage, plus upon crit hit, next hit does more damage. The glasses are going to be effect accuracy, as well as a chance to inflict bleeds after hitting them with a basic attack skill. The cloak is going to be when hit by a single target attack skill. If not debuffed, you have a chance to inflict chain damage to the attacker, scaling on max HP. And then you have yourself 3 more, and that is if you at any point in the run pick up the gloves right here, or I guess the full arm, you're going to get yourself counter rate 20%. If you pick up a puppet, you're going to get max toughness, and if you pick up this arm guard, you're going to get lifesteal. So those are the base sets, and now for the final combination, it's about hunts. Hunts are something you should always do in the game. They happen at specific times during your runs, but you always want to do your hunts because they give you shop cost reductions, they give you increased coin, they give you increased rewards. You always want to do those, and then you're going to get 3 items out of a selection of 8, and depending on what you pick, you're going to get a combination. So for example, right here you see that there is the leggings, the necklace, and the gloves. So if we picked ourselves the base of the gloves and then picked gloves as an item, we're going to get the attack plus 12 version instead of, so pretty much we're just adding 4% attack onto the effect. What you will be able to notice is that all of these pieces, all of these 8, they add the same effect to every single set. So every time you pick a glove, you get additional attack. Every time you pick a chest piece, you get additional HP. Pick additional defense, pick boots, additional speed, pick the headpiece, additional crit, pick the necklace, additional crit damage, so on and so forth. And the most prominent combination in the game is going to be 8% attack increase, stacking by 8% attack until you use your ultimate, plus 5% crit rate from the headpiece. It's just a combination, the A, so gloves, and 5 being the headpiece, AX5. It is the most prevalent one in the game. So this is where it all starts, but depending on what you pick, that is your selection. So here we're then going to just go and select our training menu that helps with offense. Don't worry, you're not going to get it instantly, you're going to have to do a training or two to get access. So then again, we check out all our trainings, we see what we can get, and here we can, for example, push up 2 Arcanas in terms of bond, while also retaining our stamina and getting some potential points. So that is not such a bad idea, but usually you want to focus on the main 3. Here, for example, it's just an event I already know, yeah, to the core of my heart, yeah, whatever, right? I just know the event very well, so I know the options, so I know what I wanted to pick there. And then here, there is the selection, we end up picking the gloves, and then we continue onwards. So now, once again, it's always very important to have a look at your stamina. The higher your stamina, the lower your training failure rate. I think so long as you're above 60, maybe even 50 stamina, you can never fail a training, unless obviously you have some type of debuff, but every time you train it does go down. So let's just make sure. We're just going to play a trial or 2 just so you get like a general idea of the flow of things. So here once again, we still are early in the run, so we can afford to push up these Arcanas by doing trainings that aren't necessarily focused on whatever main stat we are going for. And here this is one of these where it's important to know what these Arcanas do. Like for example, the top one is going to give us stamina, while the bottom one would give us stats, and we would always prefer to get stamina, and that is because so long as our stamina bar is full, we can delay resting. We'll talk about resting in a bit, so long as it becomes relevant, but for now we'll just try to get ourselves again more affinity up, and here it's to the point where we can finally just start to get some strength training in, because we also get a bit of a bonus of getting bond point increase with a strength arcana. Now, from these perks, it's again important to know what does your character scale with. It's usually marked in yellow. It's either attack or max HP, and you just have to kind of figure out what you want to get yourself here. And yeah, it's a bit more experience, but for example, Nova Force is obviously really good if you're playing on manual, because you'll be able to actually use that. Not that great on auto because it doesn't work that well there, but you do also get yourself an extra turn upon defeating an enemy, which can be quite potent. Or you pick something like the inability to drop below a certain health percentage once per fight. So here again we get ourselves a random Arcana event, which you see right here. And this event Arcana was actually completely random. It was not part of our standard ones. This could have been any Arcana, and it happened to be the Ashera Bunny Girl version, or Ashera Waltz Arcana, right? So that's why we then got ourselves an extra perk. So that one is like, at the end of the day, completely random. And if you can get something potent, it's going to help you out. But it's not something that is super run determined. Now, here we are at the hunt quest. The general rule of thumb is you always do hunt quests. The reason why is you get coins, you get potential points, you get yourself the option to build out your gear perk for the end of the run, and you also get yourself shop discounts as well as other further benefits. So here, for example, we're just going to go out and skip the battle, but depending on how confident you are with your run, depending how the run is going, if you fail the training or not, you might also be better off just playing the run on manual. It's just going to make the run take a bit longer. Now, what we have ourselves here is now the selection of the pieces, and here we're going to pick up the gloves. But what is important is that if you want to increase your chances of getting the right perk at the end of your run, you want to be able to sell the piece as well, which I'll show you how to do that in a second. But this event, always do this. You're going to sacrifice 20 stamina for going up in mood, allowing you to get more bond points, get a bit more training odds, so on and so forth. You always want to try to keep your mood in that like normal to best range. But yeah, here we are with the bag, and you can just use this trash can icon to, for example, get rid of the gloves. You don't have to do it straight away. The most important part is you have to do it before you do the void fight, because after the void fight your perk really gets locked in. So here we are then at our trading station, and now trading items, alright? trading items, there is a few that are good, a few that you should be on the lookout for, and that is, in general, for both strength and vitality, you always want to pick up the purple food. Purple food is a good amount of stats in comparison for the amount of coins you're paying, so purple food is always something to be on the lookout for, and especially early on in the first 3 sections, you can also refresh the shop to try to find more. Now, on the other hand, stamina food is always a must buy. You always want to buy yourself stamina food, because if you get more stamina, that means you need to rest less, and due to resting being your daily action, the less you rest, the more you can train. The more you train, the more stats you get, the more potential points you get. You get the deal, right? And then obviously, getting one condition restore only makes sense if you are not at max condition. And what you need to keep in mind is the items you're really looking for, especially also legendary food, which on strength and vitality is very, very nice. It usually ends up costing, depending on if you have it on discount or not, either 80 or 64 coins. So if we, for example, were to refresh for 30 here, there isn't really anything we could roll into that is worth buying. Now, another thing that can pop up in the shop, which is outside of like super special items, is going to be potential food, right? So the idea behind potential food is you pay X amount of coins to get potential points straight away. That means you're trading the coins for the points and you get good value. Outside of that, when you end your run, any of your leftover old coins are getting converted into potential points at a ratio of 2:1, which is why the potential food makes sense, and that is because you're getting a better coin to potential point ratio. So here we have this out of the way, everything else is pretty much fine. And yeah, now let me also tell you something very important. These potentials can make your run a lot easier, and that is because any stats you pick here apply in the run. The only reason why you won't or wouldn't want to pick up a point here is because you expect to see that again later during the run, because if you do, it's going to give you a higher discount. But what I always recommend you to do, especially during your first journeys or just in general when building a character, and that is the Arcana exclusive perks, the ones that cost you 200, the ones with the shiny icons, the ones with the special icons, always buy them instantly, and that is because you never see a discount on them, and it's a free power boost that you should take advantage of, especially in your first few journeys or if your character ends up struggling. So here we just make sure we skip our way through this. And then there we go. So now we are here in our second run, and the idea here is you want to rest only when it is necessary. And in terms of resting, you always preferably want to do the meditation rest, because it gives you the biggest amount of stamina for coins, and you can also get yourself something like a beneficial status effect. So something like increased training chance, better strength training, effectiveness, and the like. Sleeping outdoors, it depends on the situation. Sometimes you're out of coins, sometimes you don't have a choice. But here, instead of resting early, we want to train so that we lose our stamina, so that we also gain some points. And only then at the point where we, you could say we have to rest, do we actually do so. So once again, we're going to let these events run through. We're going to check out what are our failure percentages on the training. And we see it is 14%. Here, this is kind of where you have to make a decision on your own. If you fail a training, life's not going to be that great, right? The main idea behind failing a training is obviously you're going to lose the stamina you invested. You're not going to get any of your stat points, but what you're also going to lose, unless you end up paying more stamina than you already did for the training, is you're going to lose the potential points as well. So if possible, you don't want to fail a training, especially when you want to go and build for a character. Though here, vitality is a good stat. Getting 2 ups in these and getting close to having a Lacey be ready for hyper training is something of a gamble I am willing to take, and anything that is around a 20% margin is you could say a valid amount of risk. You see here, sometimes there's nothing you can do. You can fail a 14%, and that's just the reality of things, but at least we can spend a bit of stamina to get the potential points back, as well as a perk that helps us a bit with training later down the line. And then now this is like a more general thing with events, and that is events that ask you to pay coin always reward you back in stamina. And the benefit here is, while yes, you get less of a stamina recovery for the amount of coin you're paying, you do not have to spend a turn resting. So here, for example, we just pretend we just try to recover from this training failure. So here we've again pushed ourselves up in terms of our stamina. So now we are ready to train and do this again. And this is actually a good example, and that is the weather. It's a lot random at a lot of points, but lightning, honestly, if we head back in, we lose condition, but if we fail lightning, we also lose conditions. So lightning is this type of weather where you just pick the gamble option. There's some weathers where you always get something good, there's some where you always get something bad, but in general for lightning, you just pick the top option and you just hope you succeed, because it's kind of like a lose-less scenario. So here, I think we actually go with the Tangry Grapefruit, so we can get ourselves again more stamina. Stamina allowing us to train more, resting less, giving the same more potential points, so on and so forth. And then here with these items, you just want to make sure you pick something that fits your character. Like there is items that say if your character uses a non-attack skill, X happens. If your character doesn't have a non-attack skill, don't pick it, right? Also, we always show you at the bottom if it only applies to a character or if it applies to multiple and to who specifically it applies. So here, for example, we're going to go with the Bleed Scythe because it scales with our character, it helps us get in more bleeds, and it is a pretty good source of damage. Alright, now here the question is, we are on 2 days, so depending on how familiar you are with Journey, you're going to know what is happening when. So, for example here, because we are already on green, we could do this to push Lacey into Hyper Resonance range. You see we already have our Indomitable Masterpiece there. So here we're just going to go with protection training to get some potential points, to save ourselves a bit of stamina, and also because we know we do not have to do an additional set of training here, because it's going to be a hunt quest. Now this is what I talked about, where you can just buy these perks early. So for example, now for all incoming fights, we have more speed, we have more crit rate, and it's going to make the fights easier. Now, what is also important for you to note here is you can skip hunt quests, but I feel like the only part whenever you want to skip hunt quests is A, you already have your gear perk ready, and B, at the same time, you get something like, let's say, a double or a triple resonance training, so 2 or 3 golden training icons, or you really need the stats, but still, for the most part, you want to go and end up doing these hunts, because here, for example, you see we get another item, it's a couple protection points, we also get a discount, in this case, on the Sense of Insight skill, so now we will be able to learn the Sense of Insight skill at the end of your run, which is something we wouldn't have been able to before unless we luck into the skill. And you see right now we have Sense of Insight at a 10% discount. Alrighty, and then here we're just gonna skip through. Alright, here we get our first Fated Bond. You again see the stat increase, and also we've inherited one of the perks. that, yeah, our parents, inheritors, whatever you want to call it, we've picked at the beginning of the run. Alrighty. And now again we are in here. Once more, we don't want to rest early, and that is because of the fact that we still have enough stamina to train. But you can also sometimes end up in a situation where you just have to make a decision, and that is, do you want to gamble on being somewhat low stamina but getting more stats, or do you want to take the safe route and just go and rest? That is for the most part up to you, but just keep in mind, if you do end up failing your training, it's going to hurt your run, and not just a bit. So here we have the choice between either pushing Lacey into the golden state, which would allow us to have her appear on strength training and give us hyper effectiveness, or we go with vitality super training due to it already being active. But here we're actually going to go with Lacey, just so that we can potentially see more of a return here. Here we are actually able to pay coin to get again a bit of stamina back, allowing us to delay the amount or the times when we have to rest. Here this strength training is in the end still quite beneficial, giving us a couple ups. Lightning, maybe this time we get better. There you go. This time lightning actually gave us the mood increase, so I guess throughout the duration of this run it comes out to be yeah, a decent idea, if that makes sense, I guess. Now here I think we're actually going to go with focus training so we can push up Kyra. But just keep in mind, the more focus, the more protection training you do, the less you can focus on your stats, right? So there is a risk that you just run out of opportunities to train for the stats you truly desire. So that's something you should always keep in mind. And especially with like this third, fourth, fifth area, you really want to mainly focus on whatever stats you truly care about. Now this event, very important. Very important. You always want to spend the stamina here. And that is because it's going to give you a 20% cost reduction to one of the best perks in the entire game. And that is Sense Speed, the ability to get speed. Speed is king. So you always want to spend it there because you will want to get yourself Sense of Speed. I guess the only exception could be if one of your parent inheritors has Sense of Speed and you already inherited early and for some godforsaken reason you don't have the opportunity to afford the stamina training there, right? So here we can again use the training to get ourselves back up to full, get ourselves a perk, sometimes useful, sometimes not. Like for example, we don't really care about the endurance. And here once again we have a couple of choices. And here I guess we can just go with the vitality super training, because super training is better than normal training. It just makes sense. And then here for our final training, we don't really see a lot, and I think at this point it's not really worth it anymore, because for example, if we encounter one more normal Kyra event, she's gonna push herself into that golden, into that golden state on her own. And then here, before we end the trial, we again have the option to look into the shop, and you see how there is potential food here, which we're going to buy, because this is a 1.5 coin to potential ratio. And here for this one, it is purple food, so it is worth buying, though depending on the location you're in, you either get the full stat, like everything into one stat, or split between multiple stats. So sometimes it's a bit more location dependent as well. How effective the food ends up being. And then here, pretty simple decision. We don't even need to look at anything else. It is hyper training. We have the stamina to do it. Here, there we go. We get ourselves our bond point event with Kyra, which means Kyra is also now in the golden range, giving us the chance to, whenever she decides to do hyper training with her as well. There you go, Kyra being hyper trained. So there is a bit more nuances to this as well, some choices you can make, some ways you can manipulate RNG to some degree in your favor. Now here you see we also again encounter another event, get some more rewards, so on and so forth. And here we had a 37%, so instead of obviously taking those odds, we want to make sure we rest. In general, if you can, you always want a 60 rest. If not, you can get away with doing the 0 cost or 30 cost rest. Just the 30 cost is best for when you actually need morale, and the 0 cost is for when you're dead broke and you don't have a better choice. We again have lightning weather, but we go 2 for 3. Weather, again, dependent, right? And depending on the weather, just use the database to determine what kind of choices you want to make. And then here, obviously resting is pointless. Now, questing, right? At this point, might as well just talk about questing, right? Hunt quests are something you always want to do. And these quests, the only time I think they are justified to do is when the obtainable reward down here, I think it needs to say something along the lines of at minimum 60 but preferably 80. So that is, you spend 1 turn to get more coins so that you can then use these coins to turn them into more potential points by either keeping them until the end of the run or using them at the shop to get something of value. Or if, for example, you don't want to risk sleeping outside, but usually just doing stamina regen helps you a bit more in the long run because it means you need to rest less. And here we're just going to continue with our strength train. Yeah, for example here, Clown Mask, whenever we trigger a basic, whenever we trigger a skill, a basic attack is going to be used against a random enemy. In our case, really useful because our basic attack is powerful. For some characters, maybe not as useful. And I think this is also the point, I guess, where we have to talk about the better your Arcanas are and the better your parents are, the less you have to actually play the journey yourself. And that is so long as your rank, right? Your rank is just determined by how many stats you have. In general, the more stats you have, the higher your rank. And so long as your rank is high enough, you can just get into the process of skipping these. But in general, when it's like, for example, on hard, it depends on which kind of journey members do you have with you. How confident are you in your character? Here we're going to try to skip. You see, we still were able to do it, even though it was hard mode. But it's not something you can really just glean. It's a bit more of a matter of just, I guess, run experience and familiarity. And here we get ourselves the Those Forgotten Hat, so the perfect piece to just create the final perk. So that also means now we can go into our bag and get rid of both gloves, just so that there is no chance for us not to end up with what we need, right? So here we just take the deletion and we get rid of both pairs of gloves and keep just the headpiece. So here again we have a couple options. None of these are truly enticing, and due to us having a few coins, we can actually do 1 refresh, see if we get anything useful. So morning coffee, there we go. And now this is a bit of more special item. There's either hand warmers or portable fans, and what you're doing is you're betting on the fact that when you go into the winter or the summer region, fan for summer, hand warmer pack for winter, you're betting on the fact that a certain event is going to happen. So here, yes, we are going to be spending basically 25 potential points in the hopes of getting the heat weather during the summer section, and that is because we will move there. So let's just get our last partner out of the way. We again get the stat increase. We also get one of her perks, which is one we already had, which is why we only get a reduction in... I think it's one we already had. I mean, we'll check. But yeah, important here between these regions is what kind of stats are you focusing on, right? If you're an attack-based character, you want to go to the summer camp. If you're a defense, or better said, an HP-based character, you want to make your save into Winter Wonderland, however you want to call it, right? And that's what you should pick your characters based upon. And that is also because in these areas there will be stat checks based on your main stat, either vitality or HP stat checks, and you just want to be able to do those. And that is because they allow you to to just gain more value out of your turns. Now that we have all our partners together, we can also change the position. One of them is in the front, the other are two in the back, so you always want to make sure if you do bring a tank, you want to put him in the middle, or you at least bring in somebody like, let's say, a Lacey, who has, you could say, self-survivability. Our stamina isn't low enough yet that we are unable to train, so we'll do a training first, then a resting session after. The only question here would be, do we maybe get something like a double hyper training, and would that be worth the gamble? So here we have a 9% chance. That is something we should be able to win. There we go. And now that we've been able to, there we go, Tropical Night, we can actually use the fan to get some stamina back, get some stats back. So it was a worthwhile investment, all things considered, for the 50 points. So now that we've pushed our stamina lower by doing an additional training, instead of resting, we are getting a bigger amount of stamina back from resting, meaning we will be able to train more, get more potential points. Yeah, get the deal, right? But what is also important is sometimes knowing the flow of events. So what we could have done here instead, for example, would have been, we could have done an additional training at a 27% failure odds, hopefully hitting that. And that is because on day 4, after your training for day 4, both in the winter and the summer region, you can pay 80 coins to get some stamina back. But this is really dependent on also how many coins do you have, because you really don't want to end up in a situation where you want to do a big rest, so rest for 60, but you don't have 60 coins. Alright, and here I guess we just continue banging in strength training. We're not really getting super lucky, all things considered, in terms of hyper resonances, but sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. And that would just mean if you want more stats, you just have to do the run again, right? So yeah, 3% failure rate should be fine. There we go. And we make a run through here as well. We ended on a random event, and yeah, we can once again check out the trade here. Honestly, interesting decision. We could either get more potential for the end of a run, or we could get a bit of stamina and a bit of strength. I guess we're just gonna go with the stamina food here, because stamina still ends up being king. You can see, due to us not running into a lot of hyper trainings, due to us having a split between HP and vitality, we're getting a bit of a, we were starting to lag a bit behind in terms of stats, which is why you saw this fight being classified as hard. You can see we are ranked 57, the fight was ranked 60. Again, none of these truly interesting for us here. Resting here, you see how we are at the end, so yes, would be fine. But technically we were to gain a bit more stamina, but 32%, it's just too high. So you saw how we only got 52 stamina, and that is because it goes from 30 to 60, and we only had the capacity to take 52 stamina. Alright, hyper training, one of them at least somewhat putting us back on track. And yeah, we are now already pretty much in the final, in the final region. Here we're taking a bit of a gamble. Sometimes we get more strength in exchange for not losing stamina. This time we lost stamina, which obviously hurts a bit. But yeah, it is what it is. What can you really do about it? Now, for this survey, there's a couple different options that really depend. Also, it's not an event that you always encounter. But for the survey, I'm just looking it up on the side where we just put in a new department. It really depends on where you are in your run and what you want to sacrifice. But what I found to be usually the best is to pick something like Poor. And that's because you only lose condition, but you gain potential points, you gain some coins. So that is what we're going to do. The middle option, for example, would cost us stamina. And seeing how we don't really have a lot of that left right now, that wouldn't really be the best of decisions. Alright, trade here. If we had it, right, if we had the points to buy it, that would be pretty great. We don't, but we could at least buy a bit more vitality, which is alright. It is at the end of the day still stats. It is purple food. Alright, let's see if this works out. It does in fact still work out, which is a combination of your builds that you've built on your character together, on you having picked up perks early, but also on the parents that you're bringing into the fight. So let's just make sure we get ourselves a bit more of a power boost by getting some of these a bit earlier. And then here, let's see. Nothing really changes. We only have 3 more training opportunities, and we either train all 3 times in a row like a mad lad, or we rest and get 2 safe trainings in. And here it's the kind of question you gotta ask yourself, right? Is this a run that is important to you? How good does this run need to be? Does it need to be the prior run? What are your expectations? So for example, for me here, due to us already having a good set, we can just risk it, see what happens. We hit a 19%. Then obviously we get a bit of a stamina increase, making it more likely for us to do these other events. But the goal here would be to get through this without any resting, because then we have like an additional training opportunity, right? But it also depends. Every character has a different event. Sometimes different Arcanas trigger earlier, sometimes they trigger later. So it's not like you'll always be able to just triple train here instead of resting. And then you see we get the perk. So, then we can just, let's get this out of the way. Here we can head into our potential, and you see we have the AX5 with the attack, which is a glove base, and the headpiece, which is, the headpiece. Now, for the trade, for the final trade, none of these are worth it. We're probably just going to take the potential points. Here we're going to try and skip it. Again, ends up working. Good combination of parents, decent pace, good character, decent builds put together, high resonance. And then you see we are at the end of our run, where we can now then buy ourselves the talent of speed. We're also going to buy ourselves skill of insight. And I guess, you know what, we're not going to buy talent of attack. We're actually going to go ahead and buy out a bunch of speed. As well as also due to it being heavily discounted, we're going to go for some sense of insight. And then just to finish it off, we go for some destruction. And then that's it. That is an entire run. That is, like to some degree, yes, it would be better to just explain everything on its own. But there is so many bit more nuances to this and the like, where I just thought it would be better for me to just, you know, coach you through an entire run and give you a bit of an idea of what happens when, where, and a bit of a thought process for certain scenarios. So you can let me know down below how helpful you think this actually turned out to be. And then, yeah, that is us building a run for a character. The better our parents, the more stats we get, the better the perks on the parents, the more stats we have at the end. As well as also the higher the reduction in cost, so the less potential points need to be spent for leveling up these perks. So that is us doing a run for a character. Now, what about building a parent to begin with, right? How does that even look? Now, building a parent is something that is meant to be, okay? Meant to be done in manual. The way you want to do this is, again, you want to find yourself, if you already have some parent runs with good stats and good perks, because your further parent run can still inherit these perks, meaning that you'll be able to just compound a lot of value and be able to just refine them. So, for example, a parent can give another run more perks that you can then pick at the end of the run, that you can then carry over, that you can then use on another run, so on and so forth. But here we are picking these. And then there is 2 types of parents for the most part, and that is you're going to go for vitality or you're going to go for a strength parent. Now, for a vitality parent, you're going to want to get yourself a bunch of vitality arcanas, a bunch of health arcanas. The important part here is the perks don't matter. It's not about the arcana perks. It is more about what do these arcanas provide you with in terms of journey events, right? Do they give you mood increases? Do they give you potential points? Do they give you stamina? Do they give you something like the skill of destruction, right? Because you ignore these, you never get those because they cannot be inherited. But what you care about is the events, right? Potential points, stamina, and especially skills. Skills are what makes certain arcanas a lot more valuable for this. Like, for example, how the young lady of Stranis gives you access to the... not here. Gives you access to the perk Talent of Speed, which is something that is very desirable. Now, the most important perks and talents you're looking for are always revolving speed, crit rate, then crit damage, and then finally attack and HP, where attack and HP are a bit more of the unwanted ones, and your main focuses are going to be, unless obviously you're building something like a pure attack stacker or pure HP stacker, your main focuses are going to be speed as king, and then crit rate and crit damage in that order. So this would be for us building an HP based character. Mainly what you want to do is you want to just chuck in as many HP Arcanas as you can, with preferably some good events, some nice perks. You can also just chuck in some SRs. You don't need to go SSRs across the board, but SRs obviously have weaker effects, don't usually tend to carry any skills. So if you can, you want to just stack them up with a bunch of SSRs. And yeah, that is mainly what you're looking for, right? Events, perks, stats. And then if you want to build a strength-based character, the same thing applies. You mainly want to go for strength. Now, there is obviously a bit of a split, but usually you want to do 4 to 5 of the stat that you're building for a character, and that is because the more Arcanas you have for a type, the higher and the easier it is for you to push the stat. Now, why is it even important for you to push the stat? And that is because the higher you push the stat, the higher the ceiling in terms of the stat inherit threshold, and that is it goes all the way up to 50, right? And if you have max strength, you can hit upwards of plus 50 strength and then a bunch of inheritable perks after, hopefully. And that is something that you would then, throughout the duration of your account, be working towards, because you will then be able to use these parents in pretty much any and all scenarios. So, for example, an Arcana that you doesn't see a lot of play on characters is the Great Amazing Bunny Girl, but it is actually kind of nuts in terms of a... in terms of a parent Arcana, and that is because it has access to both skill of attack and also talent of attack. And in general, if you want to make a decision, you want to go with the one that gives you stamina, gives you coins, gives you a good perk, good skill. And for example, this is going to be what we'll be using. Oh, also, if you have, for example, multiple copies of one, that should also be a bit more of a preference, and that's because these just tend to have better stats. Now, the most optimal way for you would obviously be to go in and play the run yourself, but that is going to take you between 20 to 30 minutes and give you one run where you either hit or miss. And then the more wasteful but the faster way is, keep in mind you're going to burn through a ton of tickets, so you either have to buy them or you can only do a certain amount before you run out of them, and you would have to use stamina, which is not something you want to do. So either you have the means to spend the tickets willy-nilly or you don't. And then it comes down to, if you want to do auto journey, you need good parents, you need good Arcanas, and you need a good character. Especially a character that is resonance high and preferably also has a skill, which is the resonance 10, that you want to inherit on other people. So here, just to show you how a run works, because at the end of the day, either us doing it on auto or us doing it on manual ends up being similar, right? I just explained to you a bit of the differences as well. Here you see we failed on the final trial, so we're going to lose out on, let's say, around 35 potential points because we never beat the run. But the most important part is we have the full increase in strength right here. And then we are not going to pick up any of these perks. None of these. All our potential points are going to get focused into skills, in this case, skill of insights, And no, that's pretty much it. But you usually you want to have more talents and more skills so that you're able to inherit them. And this is also where a bit of the drawback of doing it on auto comes in, and that is because the game is making the decisions, right? The game is making the decisions, and for example, if in the area we've talked about where you need to spend stamina to get the speed, sense of speed, when the auto decides to not take that decision, you will not be able to get the sense of speed as a perk to inherit. You also usually get around between 200 to all the way up to 700 potential points less, meaning you'll be able to pick less potentials. And also, depending on what kind of decisions the auto decides to take, you might just see yourself have less perks. So it's speed versus like peak performance but time. You're basically trading quantity for quality or quality for quantity, depending on what you end up doing. And then we just end our run here, and this is then going to be the end result. In this case, we got ourselves 15 strength. We could have gone all the way up to 50, and we've only inherited 1 perk. And this is why I said, and this is why, and what I meant with it being a bit more of a long-term approach. And just to show you a bit of how different these auto runs could actually be, we're going to go in with the exact same setup, everything exactly the same. As you can see, we've already done a ton of journeys. I've done most of mine on auto, and I'll be honest with you, it's hard to say if it's worth the tickets, right? It's hard to say if it's worth the tickets, but you also can't be reasonably expected to do 100 tickets worth of journeys, because at around 20 to 30 minutes, that is 2,000 to 3,000 minutes, which would be around 30 to 40 hours. So it's a bit of a preference thing, but if you truly care about your resources and if you want the best result possible, then you should by all means go for and use the tickets and do the runs yourself. You have a lot more control, you have a lot less chance to fail. And also, I guess parents as well. Certain parents just end up being better for auto journeys because their characters themselves are just stronger, right? Here again, we're gonna try ourselves a run. The goal obviously would be for you to be able to beat the final trials to get the full potential, but it is based on a lot of factors that sometimes end up working, sometimes not. Sometimes the parents is too weak. Sometimes it's just RNG, sometimes your Arcanas aren't strong enough. There's a lot of factors that go into this that make it not as obvious, not as easy of a thing. And also because you can't really look into the quote-unquote black box to see what went wrong, it's also a lot harder to tell on an auto what do you need to tweak where to get a better result. And here you see, for example, we spent 2 tickets and we got nothing useful. But at least it only took us a few minutes rather than 40 minutes to all the way upwards of an hour, depending on how long a run ends up taking you. And then I guess as like a last side note, because the information isn't that important, but the better the parents score, the better and the stronger they are also during a journey. And that is then going to help you kind of carry more characters with these units. And yeah, I think that is everything for the most part that you need to know about journeys. There's obviously a lot more nuances on a character base, on the event rotation base. Sometimes you have to take some gambits, sometimes you shouldn't. But with this, you should be about as prepared as can be. And if by this point you still decided to stick around and you're like, fuck that, I don't want to do this, you can send me a DM on Discord and we can talk about me doing specific journeys for you based on your requirements. But yeah, that is pretty much it, and we see each other in the next one. Peace!